On Friday, the raging hot, I don't even know if that's the correct word, but that's the first thing that Ohio State Buckeyes are going to play the Texas Longhorns as close to a touchdown favorite. They have been easily the best team, most impressive team in the playoffs. This is everything we expected Ohio State was going to be coming into the season. And it's all the reasons why we were pissed off or calling for Ryan Day's head, because he lost to Michigan with this team, that Michigan team with this team that is going out there and just blowing 34-0 in the second quarter against Oregon. What they did to Tennessee, who's not nearly as good as Oregon, but still those two combined halves, like this team should have never lost a game, period. They should have never lost to Oregon earlier in the season, and they definitely shouldn't have lost to Michigan. Like, they have enough talent to where I can comfortably say, bet on Ohio State to win the national championship and don't wake up because you're going to win that bet. That's what I firmly believe. But how does Texas upset Ohio State in this matchup?
I think you're going to have – I mean, obviously the defense is going to have to step up and play an absolutely heroic game. And that begins in the trenches, which, Ohio State's offensive line has gelled together very quickly. But let's not forget, about a month ago, we had real concerns that they weren't able to get push in the run game against JUCOs, which obviously impacted Will Howard in the passing game as well. So let's not just forget that happened. And this Texas defensive front is to be taken seriously. Now, Texas is on the back end. I've got some questions there. They do have one cover man who's pretty damn good. But I think if Texas is to win this football game, I think they're going to have to pressure Will Howard. They're going to have to make him uncomfortable. They're going to have to touch him. If they let him sit back there and let those Ferraris run wild, it's going to be the same exact result that Tennessee and Oregon saw. If Will Howard goes untouched in this game, it's going to be very, very ugly. I don't even care what Texas does offensively.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Texas is the one last step. Now, I know Penn State and Notre Dame fans are going to hate this, but I'm sorry, I don't think your offenses are good enough to challenge. I don't think your offenses are good enough to challenge. And that doesn't mean, let me say this, though. If Texas wins this game, I'm not picking them just straight up to beat Notre Dame or Penn State. I'm saying, Texas is the team that could potentially win. And the only reason I believe that is because if Quinn Ewers can play his best game, you have a shot. I mean, I'm just saying, Quinn Ewers
you're right.
He's clearly better than Drew Allard and Riley Leonard.
I don't even know.
And at least in terms of ceiling. At least in this Texas offense.
Well, Drew Allard's ceiling is.
I'm talking about this offense. Texas offense is far better than what Penn State and Notre Dame are going to offer. And I think you're going to have to score points because this Ohio State team has clearly found something. They're not going to go out there and give up 14 points. That doesn't mean they're going to score 42 they have in the last two games. But I think the Texas offense has a chance of maybe making this a 31-28 game at the Texas deep. Like that I can kind of see. I just have a hard time believing Notre Dame and Penn State get to that 28-30 number. So that's my thinking here. I do not think Texas is going to win this game because I don't think Texas is even probably a top 4 team in the country. They still haven't beaten a team that's impressed me. They beat Clemson, and that wasn't that great. And then they go to double OT with Arizona State and have no ranked wins. Like, if there's any team that really actually, I believe, doesn't belong here, it's probably Texas. But with all that being said, if they can play their best game of the season, maybe they could possibly win this game. And they're the only team I think I can say that about left in this field.
All right. I'm going to contradict myself a little bit from past statements. Again, this Ohio State offensive line has been real shoddy all year and it's gelled at the right time. In the inverse, Texas's offensive line has been heralded as one of the best units in the country. And then we see them against Georgia twice get dominated. And then Arizona State, I mean, no disrespect to those guys. It was a magical season. I love what Dillingham's doing, but there's levels to this. And those Arizona State defensive linemen, really don't belong on the same field as Texas offensive line. And they dominated Texas. Yeah. They didn't get any push in that game in the run, which is just mind-boggling that they weren't able to do. Now, if Texas's offensive line decides they want to play for their NIL like they should be, honestly, you're getting paid. It's time to, step up. They can win this football game. Now, Ohio State's obviously got their two best players in the college football playoff left, and that is on
Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith.
Correct. Thank you. You knew exactly where I was going. So to win this football game, they're going to have to neutralize them. And to do that, you're going to have to win the trenches. But I think Texas has the guys. I want to say this one thing and tell me what you think. I think that this is true. I really do believe this. That if we're just talking in a vacuum, you're trying to create a spread. Try and forget what Ohio State just did to Oregon. Try and forget. I know it's hard to do. I think that this game isn't even close. I think that this spread is half of what it is right now.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if these two teams,
maybe even less than a field goal.
These two teams had met 2 weeks ago, it might have been a pick
2 weeks ago. Yes.
It might have been a pick 'em. But listen,
and Texas didn't just, that's what I mean.
Well, I listen, but we've been low on Texas.
I am. I do think Ohio State is going to win, but I'm just talking from a gambling perspective. I think Ohio State is going to win this football game. They're just wildly talented at every position, but the spread near a touchdown is crazy.
Texas has been overrated the entire season. I mean, we have said that all season. They have struggled against teams like Kentucky and Arkansas. They barely beat Vanderbilt. They got beat the hell out of by Georgia and then lost in the second half to Gunnar Stockton in his first ever appearance. I mean, they really haven't done anything that's very impressive. And even in their 2 playoff wins, they did not look very impressive. And you're right. The biggest surprise of that entire Arizona State game, I thought they were going to run all over. They didn't run the ball at all. They had like 50 yards of rushing in that entire game. And you think about what Georgia was able to do to him. They weren't able to run the ball. He was sacked, 15 times in 2 games between Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers against Georgia. I just feel like that's a problem when you're facing Ohio State. And do they have the potential to look like they did against Michigan? I mean, they did it. So I guess the potential is there, but they're going to have to play their best game. And you're right. They're going to have to establish the run and they're going to have to be physical at the line of scrimmage because I do think that's the one way Texas can win this game. And that's the path, right? They're going to have to be able to protect Quinn Ewers. They're going to have to let guys like Golden test this Ohio State secondary. And they're going to have to win the line of scrimmage in the run game. And on the flip side, they're going to have to pressure Will Howard. I mean, you're right. They have the guys to do it. So you're right. But
and I'm not, go ahead.
I think Will Howard could. There's also a thing where I think Ohio State's offense could struggle in this game, and I think that's something that they've looked so dominant over the last 2 games. Tennessee and Oregon don't offer near what Texas is going to offer on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's something that some people are taking for granted because Ohio State's offense has struggled several times this year. And it seems like that's
particularly the offense.
Yeah. And it seems like that's been forgotten. I do not see Ohio State being able to run through the tackles in this game. I do not. And they're going to have to rely on that pass game and Will Howard. And yes, he's looked great the last 2 weeks, but you're telling me Will Howard can't fall on his face?
Let's not forget what the majority of the season has shown us. And I think, like you said, maybe last segment, that the SEC was just overrated this year. I don't think Tennessee's defensive front was nearly as good as everybody made it out to be. We know Oregon was soft up there. That's something Dan Lanning's got to focus on. I think that Texas has everything in the arsenal to win this football game, or at least make it a competitive one. And what I do think it comes down to is, other than the trenches, what I said, is Quinn Ewers is going to maybe hit a couple of throws to really make this game. You said it. He did end that game against Arizona State in the fourth quarter and overtime. Unreal run. I am still a Quinn Ewers doubter. A quarter and an overtime isn't going to sell me on a guy, but they're going to need him. They're going to need him. They're going to need him. And it doesn't even have to be hero ball. He just has to hit a couple of third downs or a couple of shot plays, which he hadn't been able to do for a majority of the season.
Texas, if they're going to score on Ohio State, I think the blueprint was there for them in the first Oregon game, because that's really the only team that's going to be able to do it. And then Oregon kind of reverted back to what Oregon has done a lot, which is throwing a lot of screens. And Sark loves to do this stuff. That kind of stuff is not how you beat Ohio State. Your wide receivers are going to have to win one-on-ones down the field. And Quinn Ewers has shown at times to be very good down the field. He's obviously experienced. He's obviously going to know what coverages are going to be against him. He's going to have to pick his matchups and trust. It might not be golden, but he's got a ton of athletes and win one-on-one matchups down the field. That's how you're going to score. Just like when you're facing a Georgia offense or Penn State or Notre Dame, you got to push the ball downfield if you want to score touchdowns, because going 4 yards, it genuinely doesn't happen against the best defenses.
I didn't yes, Oregon, that's just their offense, is the screen. But even when they were trying to push it down the field, they had receivers open. Dylan Gabriel was either one, under duress, saw ghosts because of said duress, and maybe he did miss a couple of throws. Like, if they can protect Quinn Ewers decides not to piss down his leg and hit some of these throws. I really do think this is going to be, I think both of these are going to be very good games. I do not think we're going to see a Rose Bowl type of a game where it's just a blowout immediately. While Ohio State is fully capable, I think Texas is going to step up. I think the recency bias is really taking over bettors' minds here, because a near touchdown is insane in the college football playoff between these two teams.
For prediction, what do you got for Texas?
Maybe like 27-24 Ohio State, or like 31-28 Ohio State. I think Ohio State wins, but I think Texas covers. That's where my money's going to be.
I'll go 28-10 Ohio State. I think at the end of the day, Texas, we've seen them against good defenses. They scored 16 in overtime or whatever against Georgia in the first game. They scored 15 in the second game. I don't think they're going to be able to protect Ewers or run the ball. I think it's just going to be too much on Ewers' back at the end of the day. So I like Ohio State to suffocate them more in that game rather than do what they did against Oregon.